You don't notice anything wrong at first. You're already inside the app, logged in, mid-task, halfway through something ordinary, a form, a workflow, a setup you've done before without thinking. You tap Continue. Nothing happens. You tap again, just to be sure. Still nothing. Then the screen changes. Not dramatically, not aggressively, just enough to stop you. The button you were about to press is grayed out. The progress indicator is frozen halfway across, and a calm message slides into view, as if it's always been there. Upgrade to continue. No error, no apology, no explanation, just a statement of fact. What makes it unsettling isn't that you're being asked to pay. It's that the task itself didn't fail. You didn't do anything wrong. The system didn't crash. The thing you were doing simply stopped working. Quietly, mid-flow. A moment ago, this felt like a basic action. Now it's framed as a premium capability. You hesitate, not because you don't understand what's happening, but because of how normal it feels. There's no friction yet, no obvious loss, just a pause where progress used to be. And that pause is doing work. Most people remember when tools had clear boundaries. A free version, a paid version, limits that were obvious up front. You either had access or you didn't. That's not how it feels anymore. Now, the boundary appears after you've already started, after you've invested time, after you've shaped your workflow around the assumption that this feature is simply part of the product. What used to be basic isn't removed. It's still there, still visible, still implied. It just becomes unreachable at the moment it matters. The language changes too, not premium feature, not advanced tool. Instead, it's framed as continuation, completion, finishing what you already began. The plan you're on doesn't look cheap. It doesn't feel stripped down. On paper, it still includes what you signed up for. But in practice, something subtle has shifted. Basic no longer means functional. It means incomplete. And the moment you feel that incompleteness isn't at sign-up, it's mid-use. When stopping feels worse than paying. When the upgrade isn't about gaining more, but about restoring momentum. That's when the decision stops feeling optional. This isn't about one app or one company. It's about a rule that's quietly spread across software, finance, and services. Minimum tier gating. The system is simple in structure, but powerful in effect. Essential actions are allowed just far enough to create dependency. Completion is held back until a higher tier is unlocked. Not luxury features, not edge cases. Core steps. Expected behavior. The things people assume will work because they always have. The product doesn't deny access outright. It allows partial progress. Enough to commit you. Enough to normalize the workflow. Enough to make stopping feel like a loss rather than a choice. By the time the gate appears, the question isn't, do I want this? It's, why can't I finish? And that framing matters. Because psychologically, the cost is no longer framed as an upgrade. It's framed as removing an obstacle that wasn't there before. You see this in software tools first. Dashboards where exporting, sharing, or saving suddenly requires a higher plan. Interfaces that invite you forward, then pause you at the last step. But the same logic exists elsewhere. Bank accounts that technically exist, but quietly restrict transfers, withdrawals, or support unless you maintain higher balances. Airline tickets that get you on the plane, but stop short of letting you choose a seat, bring a bag, or change anything without paying more. In each case, the structure is the same. Access isn't denied at the door, it's rationed along the path. What makes the system effective is how little it announces itself. There's no dramatic warning, no clear moment of betrayal. Just a steady redefinition of what enough means, nudged upward one tier at a time. And by the time you notice, the question forming isn't about features or pricing. It's about why something that used to work doesn't anymore. At first, the interruptions feel isolated. A feature here, a limit there, small enough to ignore, easy to rationalize. You tell yourself it's just how modern products work now. But over time, the pattern thickens. The same pause, the same grayed-out control, the same message asking you to move up a tier. Each one arrives at a moment when you're already invested, when backing out feels inefficient, when continuing feels easier than reconsidering the whole system. The friction is never loud. It doesn't escalate dramatically, it repeats. And repetition does something important. It normalizes the blockage. It trains you to expect interruption as part of usage, to see incomplete access not as a failure of the product, but as a feature of the plan you chose. That expectation quietly changes behavior. You start avoiding certain actions. You hesitate before clicking. You preemptively assume something won't work unless you pay more. Not because you've been told, but because experience has taught you where the walls are. The system doesn't need to force you anymore. You adjust yourself. Eventually, the upgrade stops feeling like a decision. It feels like maintenance. Not an expansion of capability, but a requirement to keep things running as they were. Like renewing a license, like paying a utility bill, something you don't evaluate every time because the alternative is disruption. This is where minimum tier gating does its most effective work. The cost isn't framed as buying more, it's framed as preventing loss. And loss aversion is powerful. Losing progress, losing convenience, losing access to a workflow you've already built around the product. By the time you're asked to pay, the price isn't competing against free. It's competing against interruption, against friction, against starting over somewhere else. That comparison rarely favors the user. The system doesn't need to trap everyone. It only needs enough people to decide that continuing is easier than resisting, that restoring flow is worth more than reassessing the arrangement. And once that calculation becomes routine, the higher tier stops feeling optional at all. There's a subtle moment when perception changes. You stop thinking of the product as something you chose. You start thinking of it as something you maintain. The question is no longer, is this worth it? It becomes, what happens if I don't? That shift isn't announced. It emerges slowly through small interruptions that add up, through repeated signals that basic access is provisional, conditional, and easily withdrawn. At that point, the system has succeeded. Not because it extracted more money once, but because it redefined what normal access looks like, what basic means, what you should expect to work without friction. Basic becomes a starting point, not a standard. Functionality becomes something you rent, not something you rely on. And the more places this structure appears, software, banking, travel, services, the more it blends into the background of everyday life. You stop noticing the gates. You just learn where they are. Minimum tier gating doesn't rely on deception. Everything is technically disclosed. Plans are listed. Features are documented. The structure is visible if you stop and examine it. But the system isn't designed for examination. It's designed for momentum. It works because most interactions happen in motion. Mid-task, mid-decision, mid-flow. At moments when interruption feels costly and continuation feels reasonable. That's why the screen doesn't say you chose the wrong plan. It says upgrade to continue. Not accusation, not denial, continuation. And once continuation is priced, access stops being a binary state. It becomes a sliding scale, adjusted quietly as expectations move upward. The rule doesn't disappear after you notice it. It keeps operating across products, across platforms, across everyday tools that feel ordinary until they stop working. Not all at once, not dramatically, just enough to remind you that access now has a floor, and it's higher than it used to be.